What's up, y'all? Lamont Floyd here, and I'm here with the Michael movie review. My wife and I got a chance to go see the Michael movie a couple of days early, and we just came from it. So I wanted to rush home and give you a review before the movie comes out, because I know I like sometimes to hear the review before I would go see a movie. So just want to give you a warning that if you do not want any spoilers, then turn this video off now because there will be some spoilers about the movie in this movie review. So, but before I get started, I got to ask you to subscribe, like, and share this video with your friends and family. All right. So let's jump into it. Jafar Jackson is the breakout star of this movie. I was a little apprehensive before going into the movie because I know he had no acting experience. I know he's the nephew of Michael Jackson. He is Jermaine Jackson's son, but I must say I was very impressed by his impersonation of Michael Jackson. I think he did a great job. He embodied Michael Jackson's movements, his swagger, his dance, and he even sounded just like Michael Jackson. The way Michael talks, he had Michael Jackson's voice. The only difference is, unlike the movie Ray, where I felt like Jamie Foxx, you forget you're looking at Jamie Foxx. He actually, in my mind, becomes Ray Charles. In this movie, Jafar never really became Michael Jackson. I mean, there was times when I was like, damn, he kind of does look like Mike a little, and he sounds like him, he dances like him, he moves like him, he has a swagger as Mike. But I kept seeing Jermaine Jackson. I mean, that's his son, but I kept seeing Jermaine Jackson. That kind of threw me a little bit, but Jafar Jackson did a great job as Michael Jackson in this movie. Coleman Domingo played Joseph, and I want to say that he also was a breakout star in this movie.
Let me tell you something. In this life, you're either a winner or you're a loser. Y'all want to work in a steel mill like me for the rest of your days?
No, sir.
Yeah, because I sure as hell don't. Y'all willing to fight for it?
Yes, sir.
I need to hear you a little louder. Y'all willing to fight for it?
Yes, sir.
He played the antagonist of the movie. Of course, a lot of us know how heavy-handed Joseph was with his discipline of his children. So this movie kind of centers on Michael Jackson's desire to be free and get away from his father. Now, I wish it would have went a little deeper into Joseph's psyche and why he ruled with the iron fist. A lot of people who didn't grow up in the same type of environment may not understand Joe Jackson's psyche. So I want to kind of throw something out there. I'm not saying that what he did was good. I mean, in the movie, he spanks Michael with a belt, and today that would be considered child abuse. But that a lot of us was raised that way, and I understand Joe wanted to protect his family. He wanted his boys to not be hoodlums. He didn't want them getting pregnant at a young age. He didn't want them, stealing hubcaps and stuff like that. And he figured the only way he could keep his family on the straight and narrow is to be heavy handed with the discipline. And keep in mind, the boys were the cash cows. So he had to do everything he could to protect his investment. So that's just me throwing my 2 cents out there. I'm not saying it's right, but I understand. And I think a lot of people who grew up with a domineering father like that can understand why. Again, that's not trying to justify it, just saying we understand. But I think Coleman Domingo playing Joseph Jackson did a phenomenal job in this movie. This movie really humanized Mike. It showed how sad his life really was. Him not playing, being a little defiant at times with his father, but it did a good job of humanizing Michael Jackson. I think a lot of times he's Michael Jackson to us, and he's this figure that's larger than life, but we tend to forget that he was a little boy and he came into the industry at such a young age. And so this bubble he lived in really did have an effect on him as a person. So I thought that was good that they used this movie to really humanize Mike. They focused on his love for children and animals. They showed him visiting multiple children's hospitals, maybe along his tours or along the way. And if you watched my show, which I just dropped called The Trials and Tribulations of Michael Jackson on my channel, I talk about that. I talk about when he's on tour, how he every tour date, he would make sure that he would visit children's in the children's hospital. So I was glad they showed that, and they also showed his love for animals. I didn't realize the amount of animals that he owned at such a young age. I thought he owned all them animals once he grew up over after Thriller and stuff like that. But no, he had these animals while still living with his family at Havenhurst, which I thought was pretty interesting. That was one thing I didn't know. The casual fans, they'll learn a lot of new things about Michael Jackson. But given the fact that I just did some extensive research on Michael Jackson for the trials and tribulations of Michael Jackson, a lot of these things I already knew, and I could find the little things that weren't, I won't say they weren't true, but they weren't in the right place. Let's just put it that way. But they didn't take from the story. Some of the few things they got wrong in the story was like in the victory tour, the last date of the tour, he has some black and white pants on. I know for a fact he only wore them pants one time, and it was the first date of the tour, not the last date. See, it's those little things that they got wrong, but it doesn't change the story, right? He also sang a song that was made famous by him and his brothers while on Motown, but he sang it before he was on Motown, which, again, knowing the story, you start to see little things where you say, that's not right or that's not right. Again, it didn't take from the storyline or the plot of the story. Animals at Havenhurst, like I said, it blew me. He had a giraffe, llama, big boa constrictor looking snake, rat that we all hear about. And then last but not least, Bubbles makes an appearance. And I think the children really would get a kick out of seeing Bubbles. I thought that was pretty cool, right? The movie, even though Michael's music and the performance part of the music kind of took center stage, but the movie really focused on Michael Jackson wanting his independence and the way they made it seem, he just wanted it from Joseph, right? He wanted to get from up under Joseph. But truth be told, that's part of it, but there's a lot more to it. Michael Jackson wanted to be away from his brothers as well, not because he didn't love them, but he didn't want to be known as this child star anymore. He didn't want to be the lead singer of the Jacksons. He wanted to be Michael Jackson. He wanted his own identity away from his brothers. And the only way to do that is to change his look, change the way he moves and dance. And he hired a lawyer to be a buffer or a boundary between him and his father, him and his brothers. And there's a lot of things they don't touch in the movie about, the dealings with Don King and the ticket issues and things of that nature, right? But what shocked me was some of the cameos by certain people in the movie that I didn't know was even in the movie. Dion Cole plays Don King, and he never says anything about it. I didn't even know he was in the movie. Lorenz Tate plays Barry Gordy, which I thought was pretty cool as well. But it focused more on MJ wanting his independence from his father. But truth be told, he wanted it from his father and his brothers because he just wanted to be his own person. And they kind of did skim over that a little bit too. And that was my biggest gripe with this movie. They skimmed over everything. They didn't go in depth about nothing. I get it. This movie is well over 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours long or something like that. I don't know what the runtime is, but it was pretty long. But they skimmed over everything, the things I would have loved to have seen. I would have loved to see him making the music more. I would have loved to see the creative process a little bit more. I know for a fact Michael Jackson likes to record in the dark, and they kind of mention it. There's things that they touched on, but they didn't really show. Like the dancing in the studio, how he didn't want to stand still. They touched on it, but didn't go into depth about that. The dark rooms he liked in the studio when he's recording.
Q, can you lower the lights for me, please?
Okay, but remember, in here, keep those feet still, my man.
They did touch on Jermaine staying at Motown when the rest of the family left. Another thing they showed was Joseph's jealousy of Barry Gordy's relationship with Michael Jackson. It wasn't said, but it was implied. It kind of showed that. And they showed Barry Gordy teaching Michael Jackson how the board works in the recording studio. And I remember Barry Gordy always talking about how Michael Jackson would be in there while he was recording other artists and asking questions. just very intuitive and learning by watching. So I'm glad they kind of touched on that. They did kind of briefly touch on Michael expressing his desire to be his own person apart from his brothers.
I love my family. I just want to do my own thing.
But they didn't go in depth. And if they would have went in depth, that would have kind of gave a little bit more context to Michael Jackson trying to distance himself after Thriller from his family. Again, they barely touched the creative process. I wish they would have showed him and his brothers working on his early demos on Off the Wall and Thriller, which they did. They did touch on his mantras though. Michael always had these mantras. "I wanna be the biggest star, I want to be the biggest entertainer ever, the best dancer, or this, that." And they showed the mantras, how he had them on his mirrors and things like that. So they kind of touched on that a little bit.
You're confident. You're strong. You're beautiful. You're the greatest of all time.
Love that, they touched on the fact that he wanted to change the world through his music, and he said it. They touched slightly on the Pepsi settlement money. He just said, "I want to donate all that money," which was a seven-figure settlement. Michael Jackson donated all that money to the children's wing of that burn hospital that he was in after he burned his scalp in the Pepsi commercial. So I thought that was pretty cool. They just skimmed over it, and I'll give you a fun fact that they didn't skim or they didn't skim over or even talk about. Michael Jackson, that last tour, the Victory Tour, he didn't get no money from that tour. He actually donated all that money to children's hospitals and things of that nature because a lot of the fans were upset at the ticket sales and how they sold tickets. You can send $40 in and they put your name in a raffle, and if they pull your name, then you get tickets. Right? And a lot of fans were upset. So in order to get ahead of that controversy, Michael Jackson just said, "I'm not getting paid from this concert. All my money is going to the children's hospitals, things of that nature." So they didn't really touch on that at all. I will say the movie wasn't a cheesy movie. I thought this might be a sanitized, cheesy movie. Then I'm like, okay, we've seen these over and over. But Antoine Fuqua did a good job trying to keep this movie as raw as possible. I thought the cinematography was great. Of course, the audio was great, but it wasn't cheesy. Shout out to Antoine Fuqua for giving us a good movie. At the end, it said, "His story continues." And I don't know what that means, right? Does that mean to be continued? Is there going to be a sequel? Well, quite naturally, they can make a sequel. I did hear about some controversy and some lawsuits. I know one of the stipulations in the Jordan Chandler case was that Michael Jackson couldn't talk about the case, right? And I think there's some ways you can circumvent all that if you were to make a sequel. So I hope they do. Now, as far as how would I rate this movie, if on a scale of 1 through 10, 10 being the highest you can go, I'm gonna give it an 8. And let me tell you what I do consider 10s. I consider the movie Color Purple a 10. I consider the movie Forrest Gump a 10. I consider the movie Ray a 10. I'm gonna give him this Michael Jackson movie a 8. I just felt like it was a very shallow look at who Michael Jackson really is. As his daughter Paris said, this movie feeds into the perception that the fans have of Michael Jackson, but doesn't really paint an adequate picture of who Michael Jackson truly was. So that's why I give it an 8. So that's just my opinion. You don't have to agree with it, but I did think it was a great movie overall. So there you have it. So until next time, peace.